believe in the supernatural? What if I told you that some stories experienced by police officers challenge even the most skeptical minds? Today, I'm going to share a story I received from Paulo, a 38-year-old police officer, who faced something he will never be able to forget. It was a night like any other until a call changed everything. Now, grab a cup of coffee or settle into your favorite spot, because this story will make you rethink everything you believe about the world around us. My name is Paulo, I'm 38 years old, and I've been a police officer for over 15 years. During my career, I've seen things most people would never imagine, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for that night. It was a cold autumn morning, the kind where the wind seems to whisper secrets through the city's alleys. My partner, Isaac, and I were on patrol when we received a peculiar call. Someone had broken into an old mansion at the end of Rua dos Ciprestes, a place known among locals as cursed. The mansion, abandoned for decades, had an imposing but decaying facade. Broken windows, ivy covering part of the walls, and a wooden door that looked like it was about to fall apart. They said that an influential family lived there, but one day they all disappeared without a trace. When we arrived, the first thing we noticed was the silence. Not the common kind, the kind you find on deserted streets, but a silence that seemed to swallow the sound of our footsteps and even the wind. To this day I can remember the pressure I felt in my chest as I crossed the rusty gate. The front door was open, but there were no signs of forced entry. As soon as we entered, a wave of musty and old wood smells enveloped us. The main entrance led to a huge hall, with a crystal chandelier full of dust and melted candle wax, as if someone had still been using it recently. As we explored, I heard a faint sound coming from upstairs, light footsteps as if someone were walking barefoot on the floorboards. My partner motioned for me to follow him silently. We climbed slowly, each step creaking beneath our feet. In the second-floor hallway there were a series of doors. All were open except one at the end of the corridor. It was a red door which seemed out of place with the rest of the decor, as if it didn't belong there. Isaac approached first and tried to turn the handle. It was locked. "Police? Who's there?" I shouted. There was no response, but the sound of something dragging, like wood scratching the floor, came from inside. Feeling sweat running down my forehead, I decided to break down the door. What we saw on the other side made us freeze. The room was small, lit only by the moonlight that came through the window. In the center there was a rocking chair that moved slightly as if someone had just stood up. There was also a table with an old notebook open, and an unlit candle next to it. The strangest thing was the mirror on the opposite wall. It was intact, but reflected something that wasn't there, a hooded figure sitting in the rocking chair. I looked at Isaac and saw that he was also in shock. It was as if the mirror showed a parallel reality. Suddenly, the door to the room closed by itself with a bang. We tried to open it, but it seemed locked again. The mirror began to fog up, and words slowly appeared as if written by an invisible hand. "You shouldn't be here." A sound of low, muffled laughter filled the room, and the rocking chair stopped moving. That's when the door finally opened. We ran outside without looking back, but before leaving the mansion, we heard the light footsteps once again, as if the presence wanted to say goodbye. The next day we decided to investigate the history of the place. We discovered that, years ago, one of the previous owners of the house was obsessed with the occult. He would have performed several rituals in the Red Room before disappearing without leaving a trace. We never went back to that place, and to this day when I tell the story I feel like I'm being watched. Maybe the mansion didn't want us to leave with our lives intact. Imagine being on an ordinary patrol and receiving a call that challenges your entire understanding of reality. Today I'm going to tell the story of Lucas, a 34-year-old police officer, who lived an experience so surreal that to this day he avoids talking about what happened. What happened that night remains a mystery that he has never been able to solve. If you like chilling stories, don't leave here. This story promises to leave you breathless. My name is Lucas, I'm 34 years old, and I've been a police officer for 12 years. I've never been much of a believer in supernatural things. I've always been a man of logic. But that night, something happened that no reasoning could explain. It was a quiet morning, and I was on duty with my colleague Alex. We received an anonymous call reporting noises coming from an abandoned hospital on the outskirts of the city. The description was vague: footsteps, laughter, and voices, but no one could say anything else. We decided to investigate. The hospital was an imposing building with its structure faded by time. Broken windows, peeling walls, and macabre graffiti decorated the place. The iron gate creaked loudly as we pushed it. It was as if the building itself wanted to warn us to stay away. Right at the entrance, we were greeted by a long, dark corridor, lit only by the flashlights we were carrying. The walls still displayed rusty plaques with room names: surgical ward, recovery room, ICU. The smell of mold and rust was suffocating, and every step made the linoleum floor emit an ominous creak. We explored the first floors without finding anything unusual. It was when we went up to the second floor that things started to get strange. I heard a female voice, low and whispered, calling for help. "Please help me." Clara and I looked at each other. There was no record of people living there, but the voice sounded desperate. Following the sound, we arrived at a room that seemed to have been an old office. As we entered, the temperature seemed to suddenly drop. In the center of the room, there was a rusty stretcher and a wheelchair turned on its side. There was nothing left, no sign of who had called. Then it happened. The door closed with a bang and the light from our flashlights flickered. Alex grabbed my arm, clearly scared. "There's someone here," he murmured. But we were alone, or so it seemed. When we finally managed to open the door, we heard the sound of an elevator coming from the end of the hallway. The call panel flashed floor numbers as if something or someone was operating the system. We approached slowly with weapons in hand. The elevator stopped on our floor, but when the doors opened, it was empty. From inside, however, came an icy breeze and the sound of children's laughter. I couldn't think of any rational explanation for it. Alex tried to radio for backup, but it just didn't work. There was only static. We realized that this was not something we could solve alone. We decided to leave, but as we were going down the stairs, we heard the female voice again. "Don't leave me here." Alex hesitated, but I pulled him away. It was as if the building itself was trying to keep us there. As we left, we looked back and saw a single light on in one of the second-story windows. Even from far away, we could hear the children's laughter coming from there. We decided not to report anything about what happened in our official report. Some things simply cannot be explained. Have you ever felt like a place was trying to communicate with you? That the inexplicable left marks on both the body and the mind? Today I'm going to share the story of Gustavo, a 42-year-old police officer who entered an apparently empty building, but came out with something that stays with him to this day. Get ready for a chilling story, where every detail will make you question what is real and what is not. This is the third story in our series, and if you've made it this far, you won't want to miss what's to come. My name is Gustavo, I'm 42 years old, and I've been working in the police since I was 25. I thought I'd seen it all. But in 2017, an incident completely changed my life. To this day, I avoid talking about what happened that night. We received a call to check a commercial building in the city center. The place had been closed for years, but a watchman swore he heard footsteps and voices coming from the 5th floor. Clara, my partner, and I were assigned to investigate. The building had a modern but worn facade. We entered through the main door, which was unlocked. Right at reception, we realized that something was wrong. The environment seemed frozen in time. Magazines from years ago stacked on a table, misaligned chairs, and a stopped clock showing 3:15 a.m., the same time as the call. The lighting was poor, with only a few emergency lights flashing in the hallways. The sound of our footsteps echoed off the walls, creating a feeling that we were not alone. We got to the elevator, but it didn't work. We climbed the stairs, which seemed endless. Each step made a creaking noise as if announcing our presence. When we reached the 5th floor, the stairwell door was ajar. On the other side, a long and narrow corridor stretched out, with closed doors on both sides. At the end of the corridor, there was a dim light coming from a room. "Is anyone here?" I asked, but my voice echoed without response. As we approached the last room, we noticed something strange. Handprints on the walls, as if someone had run past with soot on their hands. Clara and I exchanged an apprehensive look before opening the door. Inside, the room was empty, or at least it seemed to be. In the center, there was a table with an old notebook open, its pages filled with almost illegible writing. What we managed to understand was disturbing. "They won't let us leave." Suddenly, the door closed with a bang and a gust of wind blew out our flashlights. We were left in complete darkness. Then we heard the sound of footsteps all around, as if someone or something was surrounding us. When we managed to relight the flashlights, Clara pointed to the notebook again. Now the pages were blank, as if the words had disappeared. Before we could react, we felt a presence behind us. We turned around quickly, but there was nothing. As I left the room, I noticed that my hands felt different. There were red marks on them, like superficial burns, which stung but did not bleed. Clara also had similar marks on her arms. We managed to leave the building, but something followed us. We constantly felt the sensation of being watched. The next day, the marks disappeared from our bodies, but the feeling of being followed persisted for weeks. We investigated the history of the building and discovered that, years before, it had been the site of a large fire, in which several people were trapped. Some were never found. Since then, I have avoided going near that place, but the marks, not those on my skin but those on my mind, have never been erased. Imagine walking into a place that feels alive. Every wall, every object, everything seems to be watching you. Today, I'm going to tell the story of Raphael, a 39-year-old police officer who was called to investigate an abandoned house where strange sounds were being reported. What he found inside changed his life forever. Get ready for another story that will make you question reality. My name is Raphael, I'm 39 years old, and I've been in the police force for over 15. I've always been a skeptic, the type who looks for logical explanations for everything. But after that night, I'm not so sure anymore. It was a rainy night, and I was on duty alone when I received a call. Neighbors of an old house in an isolated neighborhood of the city were hearing strange sounds, laughter, footsteps, and even music. The curious thing is that the house had been unoccupied for more than 3 decades. Upon arriving at the location, I was impressed by the structure of the house. It was a Victorian mansion with large windows and a solid wooden door that looked like it had stood the test of time. There was a heavy aura around the place, as if the house itself was watching. I pushed the door open, which gave way with a loud creak, revealing an entrance hall covered in dust and cobwebs. A gigantic chandelier hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly despite there being no wind. The smell of old wood and mold was almost suffocating. As I walked down the main hallway, I heard something. It was a low sound, like a whisper coming from upstairs. I walked up the stairs slowly, trying not to make any noise. Each step creaked under my weight, echoing through the house. On the second floor, the hallway was lit by a dim light coming from a half-open door at the end. Before I got there, I noticed that the pictures on the walls seemed to be watching me. The eyes in the paintings, all portraits of people I didn't know, seemed to follow my movements. As I pushed the door ajar, I came across something surreal. It was a music room with an old piano in the center. Above it, an open sheet of music displayed an incomplete song. As I approached, one of the keys was pressed alone, emitting a low, prolonged note. "Is anyone here?" I asked, but all I heard was the echo of my own voice. Before I could leave, the sheet music began to turn on its own, as if an invisible hand was flipping through it. I left the room trying to remain calm, but the whispers were now everywhere. They seemed to come from the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. Indistinct words mixed with muffled laughter. I walked to the kitchen where I found something that chilled my spine. On the table, there was an old mirror, dusty, but with something written on its glass. "Get out while you can." The letters looked like they were drawn with your fingers. I decided it was time to leave, but as I turned around, I saw something in the hallway. A shadow passed quickly, almost like a figure. I ran to the main door, but it was locked, and I didn't remember closing it. The shadow appeared again, this time at the top of the stairs. It was like a human silhouette, but without features. She didn't move, just watched me. I grabbed my flashlight, and when the light hit it, it disappeared. After minutes that seemed like hours, I managed to unlock the door and leave the house. When I looked back, I saw something I will never forget. All the lights in the house were on, and soft music could be heard in the distance. I reported what happened, but nothing was officially recorded. Today, whenever I pass through that neighborhood, I feel like the house is still watching me, waiting for me to enter again. Have you ever encountered something that seemed out of place, like it didn't belong in the world we live in? Today, I'm going to share the story of Leandro, a 36-year-old police officer who found an object during an incident and decided to take it home. What seemed like just an ancient artifact quickly turned into a nightmare. This story will make you think twice before touching things you shouldn't. My name is Leandro, I'm 36 years old, and I've been a police officer for over 10 years. I work investigating property crimes, but one case in particular impacted me in a way I never imagined. It all happened in 2019, during a raid on an abandoned house. We received a complaint that the location was being used to hide stolen objects. We arrived at the place and, after searching all the rooms, we found a secret passage in the basement. The air there was thick, and an inexplicable feeling of discomfort came over me. The basement was narrow and dark, lit only by our flashlights. Among the piles of boxes and old objects, something caught my attention, a small wooden box with hand-carved details. She seemed out of place among the rest, as if she had been left there by mistake or as if she was waiting to be found. Without thinking much, I opened the box. Inside was a small mirror with an ornate frame and a slightly cracked surface. When I looked in the mirror, I had the strangest feeling that it reflected more than just my image. It was like something was watching me back. At the end of the incident, I decided to take the mirror with me. It looked like an interesting piece, perhaps a historical artifact. I left it on a shelf in the living room of my house and thought nothing more of it. That same night, while watching TV, I heard a noise coming from the living room. It was as if something had fallen. I went to check and found the mirror on the floor intact, although I was sure I had left it well positioned. Over the next few days, strange things started to happen. Whenever I passed by the room, I had the impression that the mirror was changing position, even without anyone touching it. Additionally, I began to hear low whispers, which seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. One night I woke up with a strange feeling. My room was freezing, and when I looked at the door, I saw a shadow reflected in the mirror in the hallway. When I got up to check, there was nothing there. The situation became untenable when I started having recurring nightmares. In them, I was trapped in a room full of mirrors, each reflecting a different face, but none of them were mine. I decided I needed to get rid of the object. I took the mirror to a remote lake and threw it into the water. For a moment, I felt relief. But when I returned home, the mirror was back on the living room shelf as if it had never left there. After consulting an antiques expert, I discovered the mirror had a dark history. It belonged to an eccentric collector who mysteriously disappeared, leaving only his objects behind. It is said that he used the mirror in rituals to capture souls. I don't know how, but I finally managed to get rid of the mirror. Since then, I've never touched anything I shouldn't have. The memory of that object still haunts me, and whenever I see an old mirror, I feel a chill down my spine. Do you believe that certain places can absorb the emotions and secrets of those who visited there? In the next video, I will tell the story of a police station where inexplicable events intrigue even the most experienced police officers. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out.